You want to raise a teen who can stand on their own 2 feet, but you also don't want to be a helicopter parent who is saving them from every possible obstacle and not letting them grow. The problem is we don't want to watch them struggle, especially when we know that we could have stepped in and we didn't. And that is the hardest part of this stage of parenting. It's learning to let go now that my son has graduated from high school and watching him make decisions that are different from the ones that I would have wanted him to make and different from the decisions that I myself made. But as I tell him, this is his life to live, and my role now looks different. In this episode, we're going to get into why it's so hard to let go of our kids and the problem with the just let them fail kind of letting go. We're going to talk about the difference between truly letting go and what is just checking out so that your kid is left to their own devices. We're going to talk about a question you can ask yourself to make sure that you are stepping in for the right reasons and not just acting out of your own fear or insecurities, and a balanced approach to give your teen some room to grow while keeping your standards in place. If you want to raise good kids and you're doing the best you can without a manual and all you want is a little bit of support, I get that. And yelling can feel like just way too much of your energy and draining. Hitting just feels wrong at this point. It makes you feel out of control and guilty. And you don't want to repeat the dysfunctional patterns that you grew up with. You just need to know where to start. You need a little bit of encouragement and you need real solutions. And that's why I created this podcast. I keep God at the center of everything I do, but I'm not here to preach to you. What I do is pray for the wisdom and the words and the mindset to give you what you need and be a real help to the world and extend a little bit of compassion that'll help you make it from one tough moment to the next. Welcome to Mom's Emotional Toolbox. I'm Tanisha, the VBS Life Coach. Let's get into it. Something that we hear is just let them fail. That's how they'll learn. If you just let them fall on their face, they'll pick themselves up and dust themselves off and be okay. But that's not always true. And we have to really be intentional about how we're teaching our teens how to handle responsibility. A problem that I had was really micromanagement. And it was even at the suggestion of my son's dad that micromanagement be the approach that we take. So for the people who say, oh, well, dads don't do that, that's a flat out lie. But let me just say this. If you keep nagging them about homework and waking them up every morning, they're going to learn that you will step in when they drop the ball. And because of that, that's going to be their reality as they move into the next phase of college or getting a job. They're going to wait for somebody else to tell them what to do and to give them reminders, and they're going to think they have a million chances. And so if we want to prepare them for the real world, it doesn't come from fussing at them. It comes from building the structures that they're going to experience out in the real world, but knowing they're doing it under our supervision and guidance and safety. The reason we do this is because we want them to learn from their mistakes, but we also don't want to let them crash. And it's not realistic to stand by when you see that they are risking real harm to themselves or others, when you see that they are burning bridges that they will need later. We have to still lead them. We can't just leave them to their own devices and expect them to figure it out and be successful, even if that's what we ourselves did and had to do. And nobody talks about what to do when the mistakes feel too big to ignore or like they're going to come back to haunt us as the parents. There has to be a balanced approach. where we let them try things on their own first, but they know that we're not there to bail them out for every single thing that they do, every single slip up. And that's also where we're going to develop that trust. We're going to show them, I trust you to figure this out. And they will learn that they can depend on us to step in if there is a serious problem. There's that blend of giving them freedom and also backup where it creates a space for them to grow in a healthy way. If you follow the idea that you just let them fail blindly, your teen is going to feel abandoned and they're going to feel possibly resentful. I went through a period myself where I felt like, okay, you just don't want me and you throw me out here to the wolves. So now I'm going to figure this out, but I'm never coming back here. And coincidentally, it worked out that I never had to, but it took a long time and a lot of healing to let go of that. If you never let your kids struggle, they're not going to learn self-reliance. So I'm not saying don't allow them some supervised struggle. I'm a firm believer, even in teaching, in supervised struggle. But there's a sweet spot between telling them every single thing to do and leading from the sidelines or the passenger seat where they are taking the wheel for the everyday decisions. And then when it comes to the really important stuff, we have to step in and we have to intervene. And there's a question that you need to ask yourself to really make sure you're stepping in for the right reasons. Am I doing this because I'm afraid that they are going to mess up in a way they can't come back from? Or am I just afraid they're going to make a mistake? Because there's a difference there. When it comes to their safety and their long-term well-being, absolutely, it's time to step in. But when it's the minutia, they can learn from that. And that question forces you to see whether you're stepping in because of real safety or because of your own discomfort from watching them learn things the hard way, because that's not what you would have wanted for yourself. And maybe what you resent is that you had to learn it the hard way. The bigger fear is that they are going to not need us anymore. And we have to reframe what we think of as letting go, because it's not that they're necessarily going to fail. It's that they may not trust themselves to be successful without us because we've always been the voice in their head telling them all the things. So they panic because that voice might go away. And when kids are panicked and have anxiety over that transition, it can lead to some hard moments at home where you think they're just being difficult, but really they're freaking out and they don't know how to navigate what comes next, and they don't know how to tell you that. And a lot of moms look at letting go as this idea of, how am I supposed to not care anymore? But that's a lie. And we're not supposed to not care anymore. Our role is shifting. And letting go means you still have standards, but you let your kids carry out the work. And you can watch them mess up without rushing in to rescue them. And that doesn't mean you have to stand by silently forever. It just means that you are ready to guide them if they ask you and if the stakes are just too high, but you don't micromanage them. You want them to be able to handle life on their own, but you also want them to handle life with the values that you've instilled in them. And here's something that is possibly going to hurt your feelings, but they get to decide what they value for themselves, and that may not look like what you value. And I get that you think if you back off and they learn things the hard way, and you see that what you've taught them is not being used, it's incredibly frustrating and makes you feel like you failed as a parent. But at the end of the day, they are free-willed, thinking beings who are going to do what they want to do. You've done all you can do. So focus on what you can control in the situation and let your kids be who they are. Because if not, and they start to feel controlled, that's when you're going to have that tension in the relationship. And you're either going to be stuck in micromanagement mode, or you're going to throw up your hands altogether and say, oh, they just don't listen. They're just too hard headed. None of this works. But I need you to realize this. Your teen's next mistake could be the very thing that forces them to see you differently, to appreciate you differently, to learn to pivot and stand on their own 2 feet without you. And that's hard for us to watch because we don't want to not be needed, but we also want our kids to be independent and to grow. And when they see that they can recover from their own mistakes, they will learn to trust themselves more, and they will look to you for guidance a little bit more. Before I get into my last point for today, I do want to share about damage-free discipline because that's really important to me. You want your kids to listen to you, and you don't want to have to yell and scream all the time to get them to listen. You want them to respect you without having to be scared of you, and you want boundaries that stick around without your relationship being damaged because you had to enforce those boundaries. But if you were raised on control and punishment and obedience at all costs, it's easy to fall into the same patterns that we were raised with, even if you don't want to. And that's why I created damage-free discipline. I used to yell and hit and cuss and fuss and all the things to try to force my son to behave the way that I wanted him to. And it broke our relationship and created massive distance. But because I was given the gift of reflection by the grace of God, we were able to rebuild everything with God's help. And now I teach parents how to lead in a way that actually works because it's rooted in things that really matter. When you understand how your teen's brain develops, it changes your perspective. And when you know how to communicate in a way that builds respect and what to avoid the ways that we communicate that damage relationships, it changes what you model for them in terms of healthy communication, and it just makes things less stressful. And when you know how to hold firm boundaries without getting all angsty and rah-rah with your kids all the time, you realize your authority is positional and you don't have to fight for it. You have it by nature of being the parent. And so then you get to hold those boundaries without those power struggles, and it changes everything. You don't have to repeat the mistakes of how you were raised because you don't have to choose between maintaining your authority and having a connection with your kids. You don't have to keep parenting in confusion and in frustration. Damage-free discipline is going to give you a framework that helps you to lead with confidence and clarity and calmness. So if you want to get that framework and the guided journal that goes along with it, go to damagefreediscipline.com. Let me get into this last point. Sometimes what we're letting go of is not our children. It's our ideas of how important we would be to them, what role we would play. It's what we thought they were going to be, or who we thought they were going to become. And so it means we have to let go of the picture of them we created in our minds so that we can meet who they are becoming in reality. You don't have to explain every little detail of life to your kid and stand by with a rescue net ready for them to fall. You provide them with a standard, and then you say, I trust you to figure this out. And if you hit a wall, then I'm here and you let me know and I got you. And it's that being the anchor instead of the director of every little thing that they do that makes our kids respect us more and show them that we respect and trust their judgment, because they want to know that we believe in them, and not just because we said it, but because we show it by allowing them to be in the driver's seat and us not direct everything they're doing. Your team knows when you have their back, and they know when you have just completely checked out. And letting go doesn't mean, hey, now I'm just silent and I just let you do whatever. It means stepping into a stronger leadership role where you give them a clear boundary and you trust them to navigate within those boundaries. You only step in if it crosses a line that you know truly needs your intervention, because it's just something that has to be handled in a way that they haven't been exposed to yet, especially if it comes down to something legal. And they're going to need guidance, and they're not always going to know what they don't know. And so we still have to pay attention. We just don't have to tell them every little thing to do. And they get to own their successes and share those, but they also get to own their mistakes and share those if they feel comfortable. You just be the anchor and the mentor and the safe space. And when you position yourself as an advisor instead of their savior, they're going to learn how to think and how to choose and how to really handle consequences the way an adult would have to. They're also going to build the skills that they need to interact with other people in romantic relationships, working relationships. And that's what we want. We want them to be able to successfully navigate all aspects of life, because one day it is true that we will not be here. And so we need them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. So the next time you're ready to jump in, just ask yourself, do they really need my help? Or am I just stepping in because I'm afraid, or because I've been feeling unneeded and now I'm having a reaction to that? Because that's going to show you what's really running the show. I'm going to wrap up with this. You don't need to control them to raise them well. You don't. And you can keep that firm boundary and standard about yourself and how you operate and how your house operates, and still give them freedom to grow. And you are letting go of the person you want them to be so that they can become the person that they are meant to be, with you as their trusted and loving guide on the side. If you are ready to stop being so hands-on and micromanaging and start letting your team prove that they can handle some things, I'm launching a new program called Lead Like a Mother. Inside that program, I'm going to show you how to set boundaries that stick and how to step back without fear, and how to trust your leadership enough to give them room to rise to the occasion. Letting go doesn't mean losing control or just giving it away. It means shifting from managing every move to leading with confidence and knowing your role or your position in their life. And if you are ready for that shift, if your child is ready for you to make that shift, you can join now. The program will start in late April, and the link to that will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate the gift of your time. And I would love to hear from you about the things you're struggling with and the tools you believe that moms need in their toolboxes. So come talk to me about it in the Facebook group. I will also put the link to that in the show notes, and I'll see you next week.